I'm Katharina Grosse. I'm from Berlin, with studios in Berlin and New Zealand. My practice is studio paintings, but also paintings that relate to museums where I work in the museum, in the institution, or on special sites. This exhibition here at the Kemper Museum in St. Louis is an exhibition that totally focuses on my studio paintings, and it also spans over a long period of my practice from 1988 to 2022. I think it is for the first time a possibility to look at the studio works at all, because I'm very known, I think, for the site-related works, and it's important to understand that these practices do not exclude one another. I think it doesn't mean if you do these large site-related works that studio painting isn't interesting, not at all. I think it is a really great practice that feeds into the other and stimulates the other. Scale really matters, and scale has nothing really to do with size. I think size is a measurable unit, and scale is more like a psychological phenomenon. So it's relative to from where you look at it. So if I do something outside the studio related to a site outdoors or in an institutional architectural setup, the works might look small, you know. But if you put a work like this into a home, it might look very big. So I think that is very interesting, how the relations shift and how you experience yourself as small or large in relationship to what you've made. And the shrinking and the expanding of the works is really interesting to me. Even very small little drawings can have a huge influence on a large work that I do. And even the site-related works I prepare with models, and in the models I have very often a 1:50 scale, a 1:25 scale, a 1:10 scale model, and each model shows me a different problem or asks me a different question about the project that I'm working on. And that's a little bit the same with the paintings. I mean, the paintings in a certain way, apart from that they are maybe artworks, you could also say they're maybe a model, or maybe they are a matrix for a certain thought process, and sometimes that matrix is smaller. Sometimes it has to be large because it doesn't show otherwise everything I want to do. My painting has a core medium that is color, and it is not based in language or reproductions or photographic imagery. It is something that comes from the tradition of abstract painting, abstract thinking, and also the movement of the body that kind of then puts forward an image that comes from it. The way that I make the paintings has a lot to do with how I move on the painting, how I touch the surface. At the beginning it was the paintbrush, it was the direct movement of the body of the hand, and then I started to use other materials like a spray gun, a longer stick, a lens, a distance to the work. Sometimes the ladder, sometimes the paintings were on the floor, on the wall. Apart from color, I would use soil to cover certain areas. I would use branches of trees I would nail to the surfaces. So I'm very interested in how I interfere in the process of painting with color and how that process is disturbed by something else. Because I think that a process is not always a laboratory, clean-cut thing that is undisturbed. I think there are circumstances to our life that have to be brought into the making of a work like that. So the circumstances are sometimes difficult to know beforehand, you know. So I like the idea that you're thinking and all of a sudden there comes something from the side that you haven't thought about, that you haven't been aware of, and it makes you shift. It makes you nervous, it makes you shiver somehow, it makes you reassess your opinions, your prejudices, your ideologies, and that's why I like to use these different methods to make work. I think the question of freedom or liberation in your process is a very fundamental question, and it has to do with the fact that as an artist you also control. That is a weird thing. So on the one hand, you're very controlling. You want to make something in an area where you're the only voice that speaks and that organizes. And yet you are in relationship to other voices that have already made work in that field. That is also coming into your thinking. And the third thing is then, how do you do away with all these existing things? And do you want to do away with what has already been made? Or do you use it to make something again? So the question of liberty or freedom comes more by understanding that what you do is not schematic. You know, that you take everything you know out of the scheme and you shift it actually into another moment where you are, all of a sudden it frees up. And that moment where it frees up is also quite short, you know, because then it starts to get schematic again. So I think the freedom or the flexibility that you develop towards the schematism, that's maybe the most important thing, and that's why I like painting, because it is very mobile, it's very flexible, it doesn't need a lot of tools, and you can really go from something and adapt it to a new situation. And once you have gathered knowledge on that situation, you again adapt, you know. So I think that's maybe where the freedom and the beauty of liberative thought comes in. I think it's not because you do away with shackles, so to speak, you know. It's fascinating to see a show like this that spans over 30 years of my practice. I don't do that at home, you know. I mean, I know the works, I have an archive. But when you see them in real and in relationship to things that are like 30 years older and then up-to-date works, it's like looking at myself as a persona, you know, like in different growing stages. And so it is a weird thing to grow older or to grow maybe more experienced, because you remember how you were when you were small or young or at that stage. You have that life that is like unfolding, and at the same time you live right now, right here. I'm sitting here in St. Louis and I'm almost a visitor myself.